The collapse of the world economy from 1929 to 1933, now justly called the Great Depression, was the seminal economic event of the 20th century. No country escaped its clutches. For more than 10 years the malaise that it brought in its wake hung over the world, poisoning every aspect of social and material life and crippling the future of a whole generation. From it flowed the turmoil of Europe in the low, dishonest decade of the 1930s, the rise of Hitler and Nazism, and the eventual slide of much of the globe into a Second World War even more terrible than the First. The story of the descent from the roaring boom of the 20s into the Great Depression can be told in many different ways. In this book I have chosen to tell it by looking over the shoulders of the men in charge of the 4 principal central banks of the world: the Bank of England, the Federal Reserve System, the Reichsbank, and the Banque de France. When the First World War ended in 1918, among its innumerable casualties was the world's financial system. During the latter half of the 19th century, an elaborate machinery of international credit, centered in London, had been built upon the foundations of the gold standard, and brought with it a remarkable expansion of trade and prosperity across the globe. In 1919, that machinery lay in ruins. Britain, France, and Germany were close to bankruptcy, their economies saddled with debt, their populations impoverished by rising prices, their currencies collapsing. Only the United States had emerged from the war economically stronger. Governments then believed matters of finance were best left to bankers, and so the task of restoring the world's finances fell into the hands of the central banks of the 4 major surviving powers: Britain, France, Germany, and the United States. This book traces the efforts of these central bankers to reconstruct the system of international finance after the First World War. It describes how, for a brief period in the mid-1920s, they appeared to succeed. The world's currencies were stabilized, capital began flowing freely across the globe, and economic growth resumed once again. But beneath the veneer of boomtown prosperity, cracks began to appear, and the gold standard, which all had believed would provide an umbrella of stability, proved to be a straitjacket. The final chapters of the book describe the frantic and eventually futile attempts of central bankers as they struggled to prevent the whole world economy from plunging into the downward spiral of the Great Depression.